Remember in the video over functionalism and the functionalist perspective, I talked about the idea that I had all of my intro students draw a picture of society. And it's interesting because some of those students will draw pictures similar to what I have up here in the right-hand corner. For conflict perspective, this is what I'd like for you to remember is kind of a big chart or a big piece of pie, and think about who's getting what size piece of pie. In other words, who's getting the most of the pie. Um, the conflict perspective is based on the thoughts and ideas of Karl Marx. And Marx believed that society is in a major state of conflict, and basically it's a sense of exploitation where you have different groups within society that are battling over the limited number of resources that you have. Well, if you think about a piece of pie, an entire pie representing all of the resources that exist within society, well, then everybody's trying to get the biggest piece of the pie that they can. I remember when I first got married and we would order a pizza. My wife, before I was ever allowed to get at that pizza, my wife had to be able to look at the pizza. She would examine it, and then she would point and she'd say, "There, that's the piece I want," because she always wanted the one that had the most cheese on it. So she would kind of take her slice before I ever got access to it. That was her way of basically acquiring what she wanted. Well, the conflict perspective is very similar to that in society, in that you have different groups of people who are constantly striving to get the most that they can. If you think about the conflict between, for example, the rich and the rich are wanting to hang on to their resources. They're not wanting to just give them away for nothing. And the poor are striving to get the most they can. And so it's constantly a power struggle. And it's based on the whole idea of inequality within society. And Marx believed that a capitalist society like our own is filled with inequality. So it's going to be a constant power struggle. And he believed there were two major groups within society. He referred to the bourgeoisie, or the rich, and the proletariat, the labor force. So it was constantly a struggle between those two groups. Now, Karl Marx was alive and lived throughout the Industrial Revolution age of the 1800s. So he constantly saw owners and people that controlled the factories, and he saw how they would treat their employees and the workers had no rights. They had no labor unions, no anything to try and gain power. So it was constantly just a battle between the two groups. Now, if you remember when I talked about functionalism, the major question to ask whenever you read about functionalism is, what purpose does a particular thing serve within society? Well, whenever you read about conflict perspective, the major question would be, basically, in very blunt language, who's getting screwed? Or we could put it more nicely and say, who's getting the raw end of the deal? Okay, who's getting the least amount of pie? You could think of it that way. So that's what you think of anytime you hear or read about the conflict perspective. I want you to think, who's getting the raw end of the deal? What is the power struggle that's going on within society? And that's what Karl Marx and the conflict perspective is all about.